Hi, the way that you feel is going to be a big indicator that you're in a toxic cycle. There are definitely common emotions that you might experience that's going to let you know you are actually dealing with a toxic cycle. So we're going to review some of those, but also talk about possible things you can do, some tips that you can try to help you to identify them, and then also knowing what can you start to do about it. So all of this is going to come from Have You Had Enough? You can find it on Amazon.com. Also, I have made a really simple PDF. It's on my website. The link's going to be in the description, also in the channel description. So you can go and grab that, and it's just going to give you step-by-step, simple process to help you map out your toxic cycle and learn how to set some boundaries to get you out of it, but also keep you out of it. Okay, so this is a list of common emotions, and you're going to find it on page 8 from Have You Had Enough? So the first one is shame. Anytime you're dealing with shame, you're dealing with humiliation. So thinking about, is there any humiliating behavior, either something you're doing or something that's being done to you? That's an indicator you're in a toxic cycle, or that's at least a very common emotion to experience when you're in a toxic cycle. Next one is frustration. So I think it's pretty normal to experience shame, pretty normal to experience frustration, right? But the level of frustration you can experience when you're in a toxic cycle is very different than just like getting frustrated over a single event. Something like installing a screen door. That can be incredibly frustrating, right? And some things are frustrating because it's just a frustrating process. It doesn't always go really smoothly. It isn't always really easy. It takes, learning something new, acquiring a new tool, learning how to adapt to different things. So some things are just frustrating. So I just want to take a second and point out that it's not that having these emotions necessarily mean you're in a toxic cycle, but a lot of times in a toxic cycle, you experience a gamut, like you kind of run through a lot of emotions. So that's also an indicator you could be in a toxic cycle. So you're not just feeling one primary emotion. It's usually a group of emotions, and they're not pleasant. We don't like to feel these things. So another one is anger. So you can get really angry really quick, especially when you keep going through a toxic cycle. So if you've ever had the same fight over and over and over, you're going to have shameful behaviors, those humiliating things. You're going to get super frustrated. You could probably get really angry during that conversation, right? Because you're just really fed up and sick of it. Guilt, really common to experience guilt when you're in a toxic cycle. And I think sometimes we can overstep our own moral boundaries. So our own values, right? When you're in a toxic cycle, it's not normal. Like it could be normal because this is part of the way we relate and connect. And this is part of our dance we've been doing. So it's normal for our relationship, but it's not normal or conducive to a relationship. So when you're trying to exist, take your regular self and exist in this cycle, you're probably going to have some behaviors that are not attractive. They're not good. It's not a way you would normally behave. You're thinking in ways you normally don't think, which means you're going to respond in ways you normally don't respond. So that's sort of like the problem with the toxic cycle, and that's where some of that guilt can come from. So also very common to experience guilt when you're in a toxic cycle. Feeling fed up. You could get to a point where you just throw your hands up and you just don't want to have this conversation anymore. You don't want to try to resolve it anymore. But the problem is, with the toxic cycle, remember, it's reoccurring and there's a pattern. So there's a good chance you're going to go through it again, which then we can see like even more shame, even more guilt, even more shame. Did I say shame? Even more frustration, even more feelings of feeling fed up. The next one is feeling stuck. So it's no surprise that if we keep going through this toxic cycle and we keep feeling these emotions, pretty soon you're going to feel hopeless. You're going to feel like you're stuck, because if I've tried this and I've tried this and I've tried this and nothing is working, nothing is helping, right? Nothing is resolving this issue that we keep having, then eventually I'm just going to feel trapped, right? And when you feel trapped, you can feel like your back's to a corner, and that can really get some ugliness from us, or that can cause us to just give up in certain ways. Rage. So John Bradshaw says that rage is anger bound in shame. So you can see where you get angry enough and then you have these humiliating behaviors enough that you feel guilty about eventually, and you're stuck, then here comes the rage. And I think he describes, having, not this part, but sometimes rage is like a hungry, angry dog, and you can't control it. You cannot control a hungry, angry dog, right? All they see is food, and all they can think about is fight. So if you think about having rage in this toxic cycle with someone you love, it's not going to end well. It's not going to look pretty. So it's really important. If you realize you have, quite a few of these emotions at times in the relationship, and it's going to be, like we said, a certain day of the week. You can go back and watch the rest of the series. A certain day of the week when you've been around certain people. It could be at certain times of the day. It could be on payday. So whatever that cycle looks like, chances are you're having multiple of the emotions we just talked about. And that is a problem because it only is going to keep intensifying until it's either you're going to give up, they're going to give up, or something terrible is going to happen. So just being mindful, the emotions are not bad. The emotions are trying to serve a purpose. So it's not that we need to necessarily deal with these emotions, right? In the book on page 9, it talks about they're occurring as part of a natural response to what you're in. It's your brain and body trying to say, this is bad, this is wrong, I don't like this. But the problem is we're getting these messages and we're feeling these emotions and we're paying attention because we can't help but pay attention. But the problem is, oh, I have this emotion and this emotion and this is the problem. Let me fix it. But guess what? Your fix it doesn't work. So then you're back in the toxic cycle, and then you're paying attention. You're like, okay, let me try this. That doesn't work. You flip right back into it. And then it's, let me try this. That's not working. And that's part of what being in a toxic cycle means and looks like, is that it is pervasive, happens no matter what you do, it's still happening. And it causes harm. It's causing harm to you, probably to your body, to your health, to the relationship, the health of the relationship, to the person on the other end of it. And remember, this could be anyone. It doesn't just have to be a romantic partner. And I think some of the more painful ones, well, I guess they're all painful, but really when you're kind of in a toxic cycle with one of your kids, whether it's a child or an adult child. So being mindful, it can occur in any type of a relationship. So looking at that, it's not that we need to deal with the emotions, because remember, the emotions are not the problem. The emotions are a natural response to what you're going through. It's a natural response to what you're experiencing. So it's not that the emotions are the problem, that really we would pay attention to the emotion just to give us insight. Oh, I'm feeling frustration, rage, and shame and guilt. I'm going through way too many emotions for just a regular conversation. Probably in a toxic cycle, especially if I'm feeling really stuck and I'm feeling really fed up. Because if you're fed up, it probably means you've tried everything you knew to try and nothing fixes it. Nothing is working. That's where it's oh, this is probably a toxic cycle. So it's not that we want to deal with that, right? We want to learn how to deal with the cycle, not just the emotions, learn how to deal with the cycle. Because once we exit that cycle, everything that was part of that cycle is now separated from us. It's different now. So here is something to sort of recap. Just want to go back through quickly those list of emotions. We had shame, frustration, anger, guilt, feeling fed up, feeling stuck, rage, anxiety, which is going to lead to hopelessness. But what about you? What do you feel when you're in that cycle? What's an emotion? And if you grab the PDF, which is online, the link is in the description, it actually has you map out your events, and it asks you to identify each emotion at each step or each point along the way. So, it's this is how it starts and what am I feeling? And then this is what happens next and what am I feeling? And then this happens and what am I feeling? So that way you're looking at each emotion at each step of the way. And then it's wow, no wonder I'm well, by the time it's done, I am worn out. I am feeling drained. I'm feeling hopeless. Well, look at all those emotions I just ran through. And sometimes your toxic cycle can happen in 5 minutes. It can happen in 10 minutes. It can happen in 20 minutes, right? So I think that being mindful of this is what I go through, this is what I'm experiencing as these things happen is so eye-opening. So we're not so enmeshed in that. Now we're sort of getting like some space from it. So those are the emotions. Going back to prior videos, right? Toxic cycles can occur in any relationship, any type of relationship. The next point is that your toxic cycle is going to have a pattern. This is why when you learn to step back and identify that pattern, it's so empowering because now I can deal with that. And now I know what to look for. And now I know which phase of the cycle we're in because I've already mapped it out. And it really doesn't change. So it's just like, wow, this thing that was overwhelming me and this thing that had this hold on me and so much power over me and I felt so helpless actually isn't that big of a mystery at all, right? But it's going to continue to be this overwhelming, unhandable, that's a word, mystery until I put it on paper, map it out, and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what this is. And the last one is toxic cycles tend to have common emotions. And for sure, your cycle probably has very similar pattern emotionally, as well as the pattern of behaviors or exchanges that you're having with another person. So again, all of this comes from Have You Had Enough? How to Map Out Your Toxic Cycle. And again, you can find that PDF, which takes everything from the book, at least the mapping out the cycle, and really condenses it down and makes it really easy to walk through. You can get that off my website. Link is in the description. I'm wishing you all the best with your toxic cycle. Again, hoping you're not in one, but if you are, take control today of that, right? Map it out, have a look at it, and then it's going to walk you through how to set some boundaries to help you get out, but also stay out. So take good care, and I'll see you in the next one.